Welcome, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to Open Education Week. And this is the presentation by Jonathan Grunert, our scholarly communications librarian here at SUNY Geneseo. He'll be giving a presentation on leveraging your institutional repository for open education. Jonathan is the scholarly communications librarian, as well as the liaison to science and mathematics here at SUNY Geneseo. And I look forward to your presentation, Jonathan. Take it away.
Thank you. Good afternoon. As part of Open Education Week, we, the Open Services Committee and Fraser Hall Library, wanted to talk pretty briefly about how we can use our different resources at Geneseo for promoting open education. One of those pieces is our institutional repository, which we call KnightScholar. And I'll talk more later about what those different words all mean, especially what KnightScholar means and then how you can do that, how you can deal with uploading your material there. So first, before we get too in the weeds about how to do everything here, I want to go over some brief vocabulary about the terms that we're going to use, what these different things are. So first is institutional repository. An institutional repository is a set of services that a university offers to the members of its community for the management and dissemination of digital materials created by the institution and its community members. It is most essentially an organizational commitment to the stewardship of these digital materials, including the long-term preservation and, where appropriate, as organization or access to or distribution. At Geneseo, what this means is that we look for ways of making your material, your articles, your work available to everyone, openly available to all who have an internet connection. This is a form of open access, this is open access, and it makes it so that you and your material is not behind a paywall. And we do this to promote inclusive access for everyone across the globe, regardless of their institutional affiliation. The next term that we'll talk about is open education. So this is actually not the right definition, but open education we define as something along the lines of education that is inclusive of students and is utilizing materials that are available free of charge, and that can be curated and changed for an individualized instructional experience. Open educational resources, which is another term and one that I'll be using quite a bit, are educational materials that are licensed using Creative Commons licenses so that they can be used in accordance with the 5 Rs. And we'll have to deal with it like this. So open educational resources, to back up a little bit, are educational materials that are licensed using Creative Commons licenses so that they can be used for the public in accordance with the 5 Rs. These 5 Rs are as follows. Reuse. So educators can use materials in the forms freely. Retain. Users may create copies, store them indefinitely, and otherwise maintain ownership of them. Revise. Educators may make changes to materials. Remix. Materials may be combined with other openly licensed and or original content to make a new resource. And finally, redistribute. These materials are open to the public. So these 5 Rs are used as ways of talking about open educational materials. There is some leeway in what these actually mean, and we can talk about that later on. There are others who are much more, have greater expertise in OER than I do. All of this comes out of something called Creative Commons. The Creative Commons was developed in the early 2000s as a way of openly licensing material. And openly licensing means getting around some of the pesky copyright restrictions, or making it so that authors retain only some rights, but that giving a lot of these rights away and making it so that others can reuse them and remix them and change these things in the final product in ways that copyright does not allow. Creative Commons has 4 specific pieces of their open licensing. And these are these 4. So we have by, which is attribution or giving credit to the creator. There's non-commercial, which means it cannot be used for commercial use. Like you could, if you were to create an illustration or draw something and you didn't want people selling that on shirts or bags, you would use a non-commercial restriction. Share alike, which means whatever license you end up using, any derivatives beyond have to be shared using that same license. And then no derivatives, which means that you cannot make any derivatives of these works. Within these 4 licenses, we have several different options. So these 4 licenses are all mixed together to come up with these 6 licenses. And these 6 licenses are machine readable. They're mostly legally binding, and that's in the US at least. There are some efforts about making them legal worldwide, and they're easily recognizable for human reading. So we have CC BY share alike, CC BY non-commercial, CC BY non-commercial share alike, CC BY no derivatives, or CC BY non-commercial no derivatives. This is a lot of stuff going on in here, and there are a lot of different places that you can go to make sure that you are using a license that is most meaningful for you and for your work. You will see licenses looking like something like this. These logos are pretty common with anything that is Creative Commons licensed. These licenses also have a range of how restrictive they are. From the most open, which is CC0, which means that you as the author abandon all of your rights to this, or you're giving away all of your rights. You're basically giving it to the public domain, even though you can't really give something to the public domain until 75 years after you have died, but then you're not actively doing that. So CC0 is saying that you want this to be treated as though it is in the public domain, to being as restrictive as possible, which is copyright, so the least open. Different pieces exist to make these varying degrees of openness, and that's something that we can talk about more later. So how do we deal with all of this at Geneseo and in Geneseo's library and what the library offers? We have an institutional repository that we call KnightScholar. KnightScholar is a curated repository for scholarly, creative, educational, and research works created by SUNY Geneseo faculty, staff, and students, and also for digitized materials from the library's special collection. So what does this mean for all of this and for open education? Well, there's a lot of stuff that can go in KnightScholar, and I want to emphasize that educational work is one of those things. Generally, KnightScholar has things that are scholarly, creative, educational, or research-oriented. They are creations by Geneseo's faculty, staff, and students. We include digitized materials through the library's special collections and material that is published through the library. So let's focus here on educational work. What kinds of things can you put in there? Well, you can put your syllabus in there. That's a legitimate thing to put in and to make openly available. That has a lot of value for people who are outside of your specific class, because if you have a new PhD who is trying to find out how to organize the work in one class, they want to see how others have done it and maybe borrow how you have created this. So you have your course description, you have your assignment structure, you have the way that you organize your course. Someone else might want to borrow that and adapt it for their own purposes. Your syllabus is something that could go in KnightScholar as a valuable piece of educational work. You can put individual assignments in there. You can, and this is again a thing, like think about people who are newly teaching courses. So whether they are new PhDs or whether they are just getting another course on their course load, and they've never taught it before and they would like some help. You can post your own lecture recordings or your lecture notes. That's very helpful for a lot of people who find that other voices in the classroom can add a great deal to the value of the class itself. Think especially of this time when we are doing things virtually, and it's challenging for a lot of folks to record themselves time and time again. Borrowing lectures from others could be really helpful in alleviating some of the stress and some of the burden, but also getting new voices in the classroom and having their students interact in some way with other scholars in your field. You can also put your own slide decks up there so that others can borrow them and borrow your graphs. Why should you deposit material in KnightScholar? There are a lot of different reasons. This chart shows mostly things for publishing articles. Like there are things like you can give access to people who don't have the institutional sharing abilities. It can promote your own material, but mostly it can give access to those who don't have that access. And that's something that I really want to emphasize here, that this is a great way of helping out, helping out a lot of people, not just your students to benefit from your material, but also people around the world. One example that we'd like to give is this DOMES project. This is one OER that we worked with Carleen West and Sue Ann Young on using KnightScholar as a way of creating some sort of place for this project to exist. So DOMES stands for Developing Open Modules on Environmental Sustainability, and it was produced by Carleen West and Sue Ann Young. So this is an interdisciplinary approach. So Carleen is in political science and Sue Ann is in biology. The goal of this DOMES project was multifaceted. It wanted to overcome departmental boundaries in sustainability education, because a lot of times when we talk about sustainability, we talk about it from a very siloed perspective. Second, it was to distribute curricular materials freely, not just to people at Geneseo, but to people worldwide. It aimed to connect multiple disciplines flexibly, and then also to share student products across courses. So the DOMES project on KnightScholar looks like this. The first page is just this, where you have the description, and then underneath it we have the different pieces. So one of the goals of the DOMES project was to include curricular materials from many different courses that used it. So we have Global Environmental Politics, which are Carleen's, which is Carleen's work for her political science class. And then we have Principles of Ecology, which was for Sue Ann's class. As other classes start using this material and start contributing to the DOMES project, we will see things in here from perhaps Spanish and perhaps English and other places across Geneseo who want to contribute to this larger sustainability curriculum. But the last piece of this DOMES project is what is also interesting about this particular project, and also an interesting way of using KnightScholar, and that's student work. One of the things that is required for the DOMES project and for the way that they organized it was that students would put their projects on KnightScholar as a way of contributing to a larger scholarly conversation. So students from 2019 and 2018 put their small flyers into KnightScholar, and then students in the next semesters would be able to refer back to them as a way of seeing the different forms of communication that scholars often use, and this is one of them. So one question that we often get is KnightScholar legal? Yes, it is. It works within the copyright system. It provides access to your lessons, to your assignments, to your lectures, and to other class materials. And you can do this all. It is perfectly legal, and it's free for you to use. And then I have a list of folks who work in KnightScholar. So the way that this can work for you and for your classes is to go to this website, which I will just paste in the chat. Oops. And you can go to the site, and there are several questions that you can answer. So let me go there. I'm going to stop sharing, and then that way I can go back and actually share it with you. Share this screen with you. So in this uploading page, you have a lot of questions that you're supposed to ask. This is going to be edited so it's more appropriate for this particular effort. When we click on begin, you're required to put in your name, your department, your title of resource, and then some other questions below. Down here under what CC license do you want to use for your work, if you know what CC license you want, what Creative Commons license you want, you can choose that right here, and that's fine. We can work on putting all these things together. But if you don't know which one you want to use, just answer these 4 questions, and then we will work with, and I or one of us on the KnightScholar team will work with you on figuring out what Creative Commons license is most appropriate for you and for your work. And this is borrowed from Creative Commons website. You do need to actually attach the article or the material to this form, which you can do right here, and then we will upload that for you. It is possible to upload things directly to KnightScholar yourself. However, we don't have that ability opened up for these open educational resources, in large part because we don't know which departments are going to be interested. We are willing to create as many pieces of the structure as we need to make it easiest for folks in biology to find biology lessons, or for psychology to find psychology lessons. But we don't want to build structures just to keep them empty. We want to keep everything in there filled so that folks can find things as easily as possible. In order to get to all that, you can send me an email, or you can just send an email to knightscholar@geneseo.edu, or email me directly at grunert@geneseo.edu. So with that, I'd like to open up for questions, and I'm willing to talk for a while about how you can use this institutional repository in order to use OER in order to bolster your OER usage, if that's what you want.
Thank you, Jonathan. I really appreciate the presentation and learning more about KnightScholar. It's an impressive resource, and I love kind of hearing how it's evolving. I had just a quick logistical question. I was wondering, well, actually 2 questions. How many courses do you think are in KnightScholar at this time? And I get the impression, I mean, this is beyond just Geneseo. So how many different institutions are using the resource at this time?
Well, KnightScholar is our version of an institutional repository. It's run through, it's supported by Digital Commons, which is run by bpress, and that's a very large group. There are hundreds of institutions that subscribe to Digital Commons. So I don't know how many courses are actually available through the various Digital Commons networks. Although, and I don't know how other institutions organize their own repositories.
So
So
KnightScholar is just Geneseo's then?
Yes, KnightScholar is just Geneseo's, but
Okay.
you can search across Digital Commons to find things that are relevant for your own class. In KnightScholar itself, thank you, Allison, for putting the link there. And there is a specific SUNY part um, of Digital Commons. In KnightScholar itself, there's only really the one piece of a course. So only the DOMS curriculum has pieces for those 2 classes, and then some student work from some additional classes. There is material in there from one of Travis Bailey's classes and one in an English class and a Spanish class.
Hey, John, this is Bill. I have a question about the 5 Rs and also the different Creative Commons licenses. So I noticed that one of the 5 Rs was, I think it was remix. And if you have a work that is licensed as no derivatives, can that work be considered OER if someone's not allowed to remix it?
That is a great question, Bill. So the question, and it's a question that has been around OER advocates for a while. That if you have the no derivative license or the no derivative quality on the license negates it from being an OER. But that's a conversation that a lot of people are having, and it's a question of, is the intent of making something open good enough, or do you actually have to follow through with it? I'm not sure exactly where I fall on that yet.
Interesting. Thank you.
But one thing you will notice in the licenses is that if you have no derivatives, then you cannot use share alike. And if you have share alike, you cannot have no derivatives. That those two characteristics do not work together. You can only have one or the other.
I have a question about the LibWizard uploading form for
Yes.
adding either OER or published works. I was just wondering if someone's adding a published article to this, should they be deciding what kind of Creative Commons license would be on that?
So the form for this one is specifically for OER and for uploading OER. The form that is for articles does not have those Creative Commons questions on it.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Jonathan, I'd like to say thank you once again for your presentation. I'm going to stop recording at this point. If we want to open it up to a broader discussion, that would be great. But I wanted to make sure that I said thank you and really appreciate finding out more about KnightScholar.
All right, thank you.